If journalists are contaminated by propaganda and bribery, the public should fight them the same way they fight corrupt politicians. Coming up. Well, just as we've been suspecting all along, Lt-Gen Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi has ultimately exposed some journalists who are working or involved with crime syndicates and cartels. Listen to Mkhwanazi here, spilling it all out.
Part of the system of protecting the drug squad, media plays part. Let me rephrase. Journalists within media houses, they are part of this in pushing certain narrative. Why I say this is because a very well-known veteran, Mzilikazi of Africa, had contacted me almost immediately after this incident happened of Mbangeni. It happened beginning of the year last year. I think a month or so, he contacted me. He can come here and confirm that. He called me, contacted me, said, Gerald, I'm hearing that you interfered with the police operation. And what is going on? So I explained to him the details of what transpired. He understood. Then he said, okay, well, there's some stories and there's nothing wrong. So he did not publish that. And later, I think, I cannot remember exact date, I think it will have been the beginning of the year, I received an inquiry. Actually, I received a phone call from the very same journalist, Mzilikazi of Africa. His call was, you remember the story I asked you about of what happened in Mbangeni? I said, yes. He said, but my colleague has just approached me, confronted me about that story and is asking him, why didn't he publish the story? And he said, no, but there was no story there. I listened to this thing and it just didn't make sense. Somebody's trying to peddle and frame Jerome Kwans for nothing, so I didn't publish this. And in his own words to me, Mzilikazi of Africa was, this colleague of his says to him, now I'm forced to publish the story. And Mzilikazi found it strange, so he called me first. He said, hey, who did you upset somewhere in the police? Then I said, no, I don't know anything. Then he said, but is anything happening in the police that will lead people to want to publish this thing that is a year later? So old, they'd want to publish. Then I said, well, the only thing that I'm going to be presiding over a disciplinary case. So he asked me, whose disciplinary case is that? I told him it's for Gerald Khan. He said, oh no, now I connect the dots. Because my colleague and Gerald Khan are close. It could be coming from there. That is his words. Mzilikazi will come here and say that. But I told him that I'm going to talk about this. He said, no, if he's called here, he will come and talk about it. I know who the colleague is. I'm not going to say it in public. He will perhaps, if you want to divulge that, he will. That's why I'm saying there are players within the media houses that are part of.
You know, guys, this has always been a thorn in my flesh. Asking myself, who is this South African media working for? Who are these guys working for? Grand, because they defend illegal immigrants. They defend criminals. They even defend the so-called South African Human Rights Commission. They defend that organization with their last breath. You can see that they all behave the same when it comes to South African Human Rights Commission. And again, it's the same thing when it comes to illegal immigrants. They will all speak one same language. Now, listen to Bongani Bingwa here, guys, interviewing a guy by the name of Mlungisi Mabaso, an MMC for Joburg Human Settlement. Wow.
All right, allow me then to paraphrase the Premier who spoke to my colleague John Perlman just last week when he said, I don't think people were born overnight and therefore needed accommodation. They come from somewhere to be in our province, so they should go back where they came. How does the scenario you've just outlined square up with these intended demolitions and dismantlement of informal settlements? What's the plan?
Okay, so now, and I concur with the sentiments of the Premier in this sense. So it's people who are in Orange Farm that are aware of the vacant space in Orange Farm. It's people who are in Diepsloot that are aware of a vacant space in Diepsloot. So there is no one that can come from Orange Farm and to invade in Diepsloot. You see, so the people who are invading, they come from somewhere. As most of them, they are buying these spaces. So you go to informal settlements where there's been invasion, they will tell you that they've paid certain amount of money. In the informal settlement that I was demolishing 2 days ago in the inner city, people there they were telling me that they are tenants. Even the landlords were telling me that no, yeah, we've got tenants because when I got here, I bought this space and it was big for me to stay there alone, and I invited other people to come and rent, and that's how I started demolishing there to say. But you see, guys, we have appointed here. We need to electrify. You are right in the middle of the industrial zone. Businesses are complaining that you are taking electricity out of their grid, and that's why we opted to electrify this area so that we deal with illegality in the area. But we can't accept a situation where you've got your own tenants and you are the landlord in the property that you do not own. That's how we started demolishing. There are many foreign nationals there that are tenants of South Africans in these spaces, and that's why we are pushing them out. We get there with Home Affairs, we do verification and assessment, and if you are found to be a foreign national, then we take you out, we dismantle your shack, and we deal with the landlord, because that's the only way we can enforce the law in the city and deal with this anarchy. People are buying stands in the informal settlement. These are not just normal invasion of people who are looking for places to stay. People are trading in this space, and they're making quite a lot of money.
MMC, the Human Rights Commission has condemned some of these demolitions as a grave violation of the Constitution. They're arguing that you're going to be tearing families apart, leaving the elderly without care, and people with disabilities may be stranded without shelter. More pointedly, of course, they say this could all lead to litigation.
Yeah, well, you see, I've got a serious problem with Human Rights Commission. That's why I always opt not to make any comments when it comes to them. They've got a foreign national that is occupying a very high position there.
The highest number of complaints were against the eThekwini municipality, and then Rustenburg, and then Polokwane, Cape Town, and Victor Kanye and Joel Khabi district municipalities. Those were the 5 top respondents in terms of municipalities. And the last 2, they are both there. The graph shows 6, but I'm talking only of 5 because the last 2 are tied.
So you can't expect them to really support the work that you are doing, because what we are doing is we are trying to bring law and order in the country.
But MMC,
this is anarchy.
MMC, I hear you, but we can't now make reference to a person's origin in dealing with this. Either we've got a counter argument or we don't, but we can't make it personal because, for example, they'll quote Section 26 of the Constitution that bans evictions without court orders. You will need the courts to agree or you will face litigation. That's a fair comment.
But you see, this is not a demolition and eviction. So if you get into a space and you find people that should not be there, so you need to take them out of the space, and you can't leave a shack unattended. So if the shack has no one in occupation, the shack must be dismantled. So that is the process we don't get into the space and just demolish people. Yeah. So that's why we are doing this operation with Home Affairs. We've got a lot of foreign nationals that are not supposed to be there. We've got undocumented. Others, they've got visitors visas. Yeah. So if you've got a visitor's visa, what are you doing in an informal settlement? Because for you to get that visa, you need to confirm you need to have a proof of residence where you will be residing. So I don't think in their area they submit an address of an informal settlement as an area that they are visiting in South Africa.
Yep. All along, Bongani has been asking this guy some questions, and the guy was dishing him with answers. But the moment Bongani started mentioning Human Rights Commission, and obviously the guy had to tell Bongani what is happening. Bongani was not receptive of what the guy was saying, and Bongani just said, no. Njani, because all along you invited me here to tell you information, to feed you with whatever information you want. Why are you being selective now? Why do you want me to tell you other kind of information, but not the other. It just didn't make sense, and Bongani exposed himself here, and we all knew what was happening. Now, you will remember this guy. This is Martin Chibirwa, a Ugandan who is a senior researcher at South African Human Rights Commission. He's a Ugandan. This is the guy that Bongani was defending, because during the interview, the guy was trending. Of course, as a foreigner who've been employed for jobs that are not scarce skills in South Africa, which is illegal in South Africa. So this is the guy that Bongani was defending. Another one, Xoli Mngambi. You remember Xoli Mngambi when he was interviewing General Mkhwanazi? Subtly suggesting that Mkhwanazi was being heavy-handed with the criminals in KZN. You remember this?
You are heavy-handed, and there is an understanding that you are dealing with very violent criminals who are not afraid to confront law enforcement officers. But how do you respond to that criticism, that you meeting fire with fire is something that may potentially get you into trouble with the law, or specifically those officers?
Well, it's a difficult thing to argue with someone who calls himself an expert on the field and yet he doesn't know anything. So if I were to debate you about journalism, I'll look like a fool, because I have no slightest idea what it takes for you to put this whole production together. An operation of the police is better known by a police officer. Even myself being here, having worked in so many years in many high-risk environments, with experience I have, but I cannot judge police officers that were involved in an accident somewhere until I hear from those police officers what transpired. So it is just unfortunate that we get people that claim to be expert. Now, I do not know how many experts are there in football, except those that are playing football. But how many people sit behind the mic like then they call themselves expert by just analyzing the game and talking about, they don't know how to kick a ball. So it's the same thing we see in the police. It seems like a police becoming a profession that is taken for granted, that everyone believes that the right way of policing is this and the right way of policing is that. And we want to welcome all of them. Anyone that has an opinion or a suggestion to make, they know how to get hold of us. If they don't know, go to a nearest police station, invite Mkhwanazi to sit down with you, and then we can lecture you on how we do business. And if we have operations, perhaps we want to volunteer as a reservist, come and join us so that you can go kick doors and approach those hardened criminals. We put you in front, and then you lead us in terms of tackling that criminal. Then perhaps you'll come out there differently, and you'll start preaching a different gospel.
And another one, Sunday Times. And look again, with everything that Mkhwanazi said at the Madlanga Commission, and the names that he mentioned, the Tseles, Begi Tsele that he mentioned, and the Ketmatlalas and the Mkhunus, the media chooses to go for Mkhwanazi. Look what Sunday Times is saying about Mkhwanazi. KZN top Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi ended his much anticipated testimony at the Madlanga Commission after 3 days this week, leaving many decidedly unsatisfied by a lack of solid evidence. Yeah. See, the media, they didn't find anything to say about Begi Tsele that Mkhwanazi revealed, exposed. They didn't find anything to say about Mkhunu. They didn't find anything to say about Ketmatlalas and all these other guys that General Mkhwanazi exposed. They didn't say anything about Kola Barnett of DA. They didn't say anything about Fediel Adams and. But they chose to go for Mkhwanazi. See what I mean? How about SABC? It went for Shamila Batoy's story. Look, NPA head Shamila Batoy has urged South Africans to treat testimonies at the Madlanga Commission as an allegations until verified, cautioning against premature judgment. Wow. Yeah, guys. We are really having a serious problem about South African mainstream media's propaganda. They are not out there to defend us at all. They are just pushing their own narratives and their own agenda. They're not there for you and me. What do you think? Let me hear your comment below. And of course, if you are coming for the first time, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.